decent turnout so far. And we might have a few people joining anyways later on. I reckon
Yeah,
we just get started.
I think so. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let me start sharing. And yes, welcome everyone. I know it's been a really long time since we've actually seen you guys face to face. We've done a few recordings last year, start of this year, I think, or last year. We did a few recordings that we thought might work out for third year, and then we decided to abandon that, as you may have seen. So this is like our little, there's a few reasons for that, and we'll touch on it a little bit later. But I think this is probably something that we thought would be a little bit more worthwhile for you guys. A little bit more about, I guess, the general ways to study for fourth year, and kind of like the reasons why there were things that we did that were quite successful, and maybe things that we did that we thought hampered us a bit, and we wanted to pass that on to you so that you don't have the same issues, or at least if you do, then you know exactly what to like get out of it and how to learn from it and prosper instead of suffer.
Yeah.
Which is what seems to be the theme with year 4C, guys. I know that a lot of people say that 4C is like the toughest year that you'll face in med school at Monash, and I'm not sure if you guys have had the session with faculty where they showed you a diagram of people's stress levels and moods across each of the years. And I think if I could be wrong, correct me guys if I am, but I'm pretty sure on that graph it was like second year and fourth year that were the peaks. Because second year tends to be the year that you get a ton of like really difficult systems that you need to grasp, like pelvis and head and neck and all that sort of stuff. And then in a similar way, fourth year is kind of like that, where you have now instead of one matrix, you have four matrices. So like people tend to sell this idea that 4C is the toughest year. And I guess while we may not be here to say that's not true, we do want to show you that it's not as tough as people say it is. Like relatively sure, but I think we'll be able to give you some tips and insights and reassurances to demonstrate that no, it's not that bad. And in fact, it can actually be fun. So that's
Yeah.
my little opening statement. Does anyone else have anything that want to add before I
I
get
wanna
started?
I wanna just put a little disclaimer at the front also. This is all there's no one size fits all approach to fourth year. The very broad set of disciplines. Everyone will have slightly different approaches that work for them. We're gonna tell you what worked for us. You don't like there's nothing wrong if you try something that we did and you're like, this is terrible, I hate this, I don't want to do it. That's okay. Maybe that doesn't work for you. We're gonna try and give you a range of different approaches so you can sort of mix and match and you can try a couple of things and hopefully something does work for you. And that's the best advice I can give you, which is the same as what you said for previous years because it works. Once you find something that works for you, that is the most important thing. There's no correct way to study. We can give you like sort of guides and things that hopefully point you in better directions or easier directions. But the best study strategy is the one that you like.
Absolutely. Very well said, James. And just to, I mean, I feel like I need to explain why these photos are here because I put them in for a reason. I don't know if anyone actually follows F1 or motorsports or anything like that, but obviously these are pictures of some of the F1 drivers, and there's one of the drivers there who's looking a bit frustrated. The reason why I put this here, aside from obviously the similarity between the name Guide to Survive and Drive to Survive, which is the Netflix TV show that kind of made F1 more popular to the masses. Aside from that, I think that the reason why this is here is because I used to be someone who was not very into motorsports or F1 in general, and I used to always make fun of people who were into it, and I was like, oh, it's basically just a bunch of rich people driving really expensive cars around a track like 50 times, and really dumb people buy tickets to watch that. And you're basically sitting there to watch the most expensive car win. Like obviously it's gonna win. Like that's the way I used to think. But then I watched this TV show and I was like, oh, there's actually so much more to F1 than I thought. Like there's this engineering side of things. There's the competition between the companies. The companies are using this for advertising. It's all like a science experiment. There's drama between drivers. And it kind of opened up this new dimension for me. And it was really just this like one TV show that changed my entire perspective on something that, I had this really strong negative outlook towards. And while I may not have convinced you to watch this TV show, even though I think you should, I think what this showed me and what I think it might show you is that even though you may have been told, that 4C is like this, 4C is like that, or even people around you maybe are getting quite stressed out by the fact that you need to study so much and need to go to placement so much. I think it's really important to try and ground yourself and come to, a session like this, or have a perspective from someone who's gone through 4C before, and ideally very recently, because sometimes all it takes is that few minutes of talking about how the rest of the year is going to look and how you can really deal with those stresses. to show you that actually it's not as bad as people make it out to be. And I know that, for each and every one of us in the PS Platypus team, year 4C was probably quite stressful, but we wouldn't say it was any more stressful than any other year where you've had to go out of your way and learn new things. And we want you to look at 4C as a very rich and deep learning opportunity rather than as this source of stress that you just need to get through so that you can enjoy year 5 and then your future of medicine. So that's the perspective, and I guess the reason why those pictures are there. But hopefully through this session, we'll elaborate on those points a bit further. We've divided the session up into 4 parts. The last part is a Q&A, where we will stop the recording and we'll just kind of talk, like I guess very like openly about the sorts of things that we have learned from year 4C. But before that, the 3 parts are quite structured. And we're going to start off with just some general advice that each of the PS Platypus members wants to give you. Hopefully, this little talk will just prime you to kind of how to approach year 4C. And then the next 2 parts will be about the specific specialties and some information relevant to that, including assessments. And finally, how each of us approached these specialties and how we approached 4C in general. So I'll just get started very quickly. So the tips that I have here, I know it's a lot, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that kind of like a race, it's important to remember that, it's more of a sprint than a marathon. And remember that the main thing you want to try and do is to show that you are keen and you want to involve yourself as much as possible with the team, even if you feel like, this is a specialty that I'm not really interested in, or, you spend the first couple of weeks and you haven't really found it that appealing. That's totally fine. Remember that you're there not to gain everything out of that specific specialty or become a doctor in that specialty, even though that might not be an interesting area of medicine for you. The main goal is to just get the skills to be able to feel confident in a hospital, and to also get the skills to feel like next year when you're kind of pre-intern doctors, you will feel like you can actually do things around the hospital, communicate with team members and get things done. So I guess that's the perspective that you should have. But if you, at the same time, on the other side of the coin, if you do feel like you're not achieving much in spite of, trying to get those opportunities, please don't feel ashamed in leaving. I actually had a lot of, 4th years like you guys message me about, like I've only spent 3 hours in the hospital today and I've just left. Like this feels horrible. And I feel like this is what the rest of my week is going to be like. What do I do? And while I can offer you tips on trying to engage more with the team or trying to find opportunities with other members of the team that you may not have rounded with before or something like that. Ultimately, if you feel like you're actually not getting much done, just remember why you're there in the hospital. You're not there to do jobs, you're there to learn. And if that learning is kind of getting exhausted, please don't feel bad about leaving, as long as you're transparent with the team and you know exactly why that's the case. So please don't feel any shame if that happens. Also, I think one thing that can help to protect against this and to not feel as bad when you need to leave is to write out exactly what you wanted to get out of your time on a specific rotation, whether it's women's health, psych, children's health, GP, and try and use that as a guide throughout the rotation. So just say, like, list out a few things that you think you can achieve during your time on that rotation and tick them off as you go or pace them out throughout the weeks that you're on that rotation. And if you feel like you're actually completing those mini tasks, satisfactorily over those weeks, that tells you that you're doing a good job. Sometimes what we do is internally in our minds, we set a bunch of tasks. And then even if we achieve 2 or 3 out of 10 of them, we feel really, really bad, even if those 2 or 3 things were really big things. So one, I guess, like summarizing tip I would give you is just to aim to do one thing each day, aim to do that one thing really well. And as long as you've done that, that's enough. Please don't have really high expectations for yourself to do like 10 different things because, another med student is doing it in another rotation or, they've done like 10 cannulas. Why haven't I done that? That's totally fine. Everyone has their own growth. So please don't be demoralized and please pace yourselves. I'll pass it on to James now.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it short and sweet. So, I think the biggest thing that I have to hand off is basically the rotation is really not equal in terms of how much time they take to prep for. And like I think obviously in an overall sense, every rotation is a chance for you to understand an aspect of clinical medicine. And so, no matter what you do, regardless of the exam impact, it's going to be important, like that you get a general understanding of how things work and the important stuff that because you're going to catch psych stuff and women's stuff and ped stuff in ED. You're going to have to refer to GPs if you're not becoming a GP yourself. All of them are important to get to have some working understanding of. But in terms of the actual content and the depth and the volume of stuff, it's not equal, really. I would say, at least in my experience, I'm hoping in the rest of the group's experience as well, peds and psych are relatively quite content light compared to women's and GP. And I think the more you approach it like that, so you don't think of it as each rotation is like a self-contained sort of thing. Um, you teach it, you think of it as I have 1 year that I get to apply to these four specialties, and I know two of them at least are going to be more heavy. If you come in with that approach from the very start, then you have much more realistic pacing. Whereas if you like start the year on like GP psych on like psych peds, and you don't like you just confine yourself to those, and you keep it pretty cruisy, and then you have second sem women's GP, you're gonna have a bad time basically. So you want to try and spread it out evenly across the year, so that you have like you have the stamina basically. You're not just rushing, because only bad things are going to happen if you do that. Um, as with every year, and I'm sure they've told you, like the uni has told you this, but it really does work. When you see something in hospital, go home and like use that as an opportunity to shore things up. Um, because it is, at least for me, I can say, so this is my personal take, but I think for me, things stick in my head so much easier when I can relate it back to a patient. Like I still remember, X who has this disease or Y who came in with this disease and ended up with that. And it's a very easy sort of conceptual way to think about the whole scenario as well, which is useful, both in terms of exams and also in terms of clinical reasoning. Especially in terms of GP, because then when you're parallel consulting and that sort of thing, you start to really develop that thinking that you need, for like, how do I control an entire encounter from like the presenting complaint all the way through to my management plan. And when you think of it as a person instead of just like stats and facts, then you start noticing your blind spots. You're like, I don't know what to say if they ask me this. Like, I didn't expect that question. I don't know this detail that actually is important. So I think that's a really good approach. And the other, like, last thing I'll say is, there's a lot of stuff out there that's like revision resources, Muse revision lectures, Jody Keen's fantastic lectures for ONG. Lots and lots of stuff out there. I would say, honestly, my take is you should probably just watch those at the start of the rotation. You and probably also watch them at the end, but then as revision. Because at least for Jody Keen's one and quite a few of the MUMIS, maybe not all of them, but a lot of the MUMIS lectures, they work just as well as a jumpstart sort of thing. And I know for me at least, when I was trying to sort of piece everything together bit by bit, like, oh, let me go and find out about this random topic, I'd go and I'd sort of struggle through and I'd take ages to get myself into a workable understanding of the topic. And then I watched the vision lecture and they sum it up in like 3 sentences. I'm like, why didn't I just do that? So if you can go to that like at the start and then you have something to build off, then that's really good. Yeah. Journal.
Yeah, hey guys, congratulations on making it to year four. I know you guys had a very interesting set of exams back in third year. So good job on making your way through year three, and now you're in year four. I think the main thing to keep in mind in year four is having a bit of faith in yourself, because I know you're kind of thrown in the deep end with parallel consulting and GP, with seeing your own patients in PEDS, ED, and various other clinics where sort of you have responsibility to look after an entire patient, or it feels like that at least. So just have a little bit of faith in yourself that you're able to apply the bedside skills you've learned, the clinical reasoning you've learned to be able to see your patients. But also remember that you're ultimately being supervised. So everything you're doing is under the guise or supervision of someone else. So remember, you can lean back on your regs, your consultants, whoever's supervising you. Remember to go back to them and ask them for advice, and always come back to the patient with your supervisor so you can give the plan to your patient as well. So don't back down from those opportunities. Really seize them and use them to build your clinical skills in bedside manner. The next thing as well is you guys will have exams coming up at the end of the year as well, and apexes throughout the year, as well as your OSCEs at the end of the year. It's really important that you sort of consistently quiz yourself throughout the year with the various different resources you have available. So eMedici, I think, is the really big one that's pushed by Monash now. It's because it's built around the Australian guidelines, and also because it's sort of got very high yield, like women's health based questions and GP based questions in different sections. So it really helps you cater your revision to the different rotations that you're on. So I'd really recommend checking that out, or even making your own Anki cards, using Anki cards from other students from previous years. But whatever you do, make sure that you're not leaving everything till the very end, because it can very easily stack up, especially for given the fact that you have two exams to think about, not just one. I'd really I guess, press on the importance of quizzing yourself throughout rather than leaving it all to the end. Cool. I'll pass it on to Deepak.
Thanks, Journal. Yeah, so I think this is all brilliant advice that everyone's given so far, and I would love to echo it because I wish I had heard like a lot of those things. There are just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about in further. So with what James said about reading or looking through summary videos early or revision resources early is like a really, really good tip, in my opinion. If you can think of, I was told this concept once, which is you're sort of like setting down the fish bone, or like you're sort of creating the bones before you put the meat on the bones, and the meat is the content, and the fish bone is like the structure of like what on earth you're learning, right? So I think what I ended up doing, which helped a lot, was I spent the first few weeks of each rotation just sort of figuring out what on earth is going on from the perspective of what like the general structure of content looks like, as well as how the teams work. Because, for example, psych works very differently from the way they approach patients to all the way to like ED and like everything in middle. So the fishbone concept helped me a lot, and accompanying that with what Janel said about eMedici, because strangely, like question banks also sort of give you a foray into like what sort of knowledge you need to know. So spending the first few weeks trying to figure out what you actually need to know is a pretty good use of your time. And I found that in terms of the clinical time that you spend with your team, like James said as well, you'll have a lot more free time on peds and psych. And I made use of that time through just trying to get as engaged with the team as possible. And I think it's sort of like, I feel very confident at the end of fourth year talking to consultants, even from like a social perspective, just because I spent enough time around them just to be able to treat them as like just a colleague to some degree. So I highly recommend that, trying to sort of feel like you're settling into a workspace. And I feel like I've grown a lot just by having that approach to working with a clinical team. And also don't forget to continue to explore what interests you in terms of specialties and sort of content that you enjoy learning. So yeah.
Great. Some fantastic tips. Again, like Deepak said, it's not just tips that you guys could get from us, but I feel like we as a team are also learning from each other quite a lot, which is why it's so good to have, this community of students like you who are maybe not even in the same rotation, but just have similar perspectives and can share with each other the resources and things that have really helped you throughout the year. So that's a really, really helpful thing to have. I know that we also have Raymond and Yajat with us today, who are part of the PS Platypus team, but may not have had time to write out a full section for this. Did you guys want to add anything else to these sort of general things that you wish people had told you when you were in fourth year?
That's all good. I've got a slide coming up later.
Amazing. Amazing. Very well prepared. Cool. Okay, let's continue then. So part two is a bit more formal. We're just going to be talking about the specialties that you're going to cover across the year, as well as some really helpful resources that might guide you in those respects. I know that because you are covering 4 different specialties, and each of those specialties comes with its own set of like general study resources, like things that you would have been using in third year, but also specialty specific things, such as guidelines and that sort of thing that are promoted by the consultants on those, or the clinicians on those specialties. It can get really, really confusing mapping out where you should get your primary sources of information from. Hopefully this gives you a better idea. I don't think it'll help a huge amount, because ultimately it depends on you which resources you want to use and which resources just really, I guess, the ones that are easiest for you to digest. But hopefully you can build a list from today. So we'll start off with pediatrics. I didn't cover pediatrics. James, did you want to start with this one?
Yeah. No worries, this is one of mine. So, peds is a funny one. I would say that in terms of assessment, the PEDS rotation is a little bit divorced from the PEDS exam. We'll get more into that a bit later. So in terms of the actual rotation, it's actually very similar to third year. Because in a lot of ways, unlike the other specialties, which can often be a little bit more different in structure, PEDS is basically just like, it's not literally tiny adults, but the structure of how you deliver care is pretty similar, right? You've got wards around, you've got clinics, you've got theatre, depending on what you're doing. And all of those are really cool. So like, I don't know, I think lots of people go into med school and they're like, I want to be a pediatrician because I love kids so much. And like a lot of people get turned off over time, partially because you have to, deal with parents and there's a lot of politics and heartache there. But when you're on a rotation in med school, you just get to deal with the kids and you don't have to deal with the parents, because the residents and the consultants are over there and everyone are there to do it. So enjoy it, basically. If you're a kid, if you're a person who likes kids. If you're not a person who likes kids, I don't know, go home. When you stop learning. In terms of the actual assessments, so in terms of the exam, like I said, I'm gonna release some resources into the form of some Anki stuff, that covers most of the basic stuff. So, every year Monash has informed us that they're going to change the PEDS exam for real, definitely. And so far they have continued to use a similar overall structure of the exams. I'll come back to that a bit later, but we'll have some resources that hopefully cover the sort of structure that's been used in past years and give you a bit of a foundation there. Apex for PEDS is an interesting one because it can be quite different in some ways, but quite similar in some ways. So the similarities are that the basic idea of the exams is usually pretty similar. You didn't do ENT in third year, so that will be a new thing. But you did hopefully do, all your cardio, resp, GIT, neuro, all of that sort of stuff. And the PEDS versions of the exams are often very similar. The exception would be if you're doing like a newborn exam or something, then obviously it's going to be a different sort of setup and that's more holistic. But for most kids, so you have a 6 to 15-year-old or something, that exam is pretty similar to the adult exam. In fact, I would say arguably, if you've got like a 12-year-old and up, like at that point, you're basically just doing an adult exam on a kid. Be aware if you've got any, they added newborn exam and upper limb, lower limb exam. Okay, sure. Okay. So upper limb, lower limb exam, you guys hopefully remember the MSK stuff. That's way back. So go dig up your notes and have a look at that. That will again be mostly similar. The newborn exam. So since you mentioned the newborn exam, I'm glad they took the development milestones exam off because I think that was always a bit sketch. It was mostly just like memorizing that Denver 2 chart, which I think is a bit sketch in general and probably maybe not the best use of your time. Newborn exam is good. So what I have to say about the newborn exam is similar to a lot of the other exams, especially anything on like a toddler. So if they're like 5 and younger, including obviously newborns, the biggest thing is flow. Okay. And that's actually reflected in the marking scheme. So they give you a lot of marks in terms of your interaction with the patient and how you structure the exam around the fact that this is a child. And so like the purest example of that is the newborn exam, which is basically you think about everything you do should be thinking about, okay, what will work on a newborn and what will not work once I start pissing the newborn off, which you will start pissing the newborn off because it's a newborn. Okay. So, some like really simple stuff, your auscultation, anything super sensitive that needs, you need quiet for, you need to do that first because that baby will start crying eventually. Or it may or may not, you can't guarantee. And then you can have a sort of systematic approach. It's not literally body systems anymore because there's no point in that because for a child, you're looking at the major milestones. So you can do basically a head to toe sort of assessment. So you can go, boom, look at the fontanelles, look at the facial features, move down. This is after you've already done your auscultation, right? Because that needs to be quiet. Do that, then you start doing your handling. And it doesn't matter, the baby can be squirming, can be crying, can be doing whatever you want. You're still able to look at those features, so you can leave those till later. You go down, look at the whole child, and then you can do your overall stuff. So you can do stuff like you turn it over, look at your spinal development stuff, do your Moro reflex, do all of that sort of stuff. And so getting the flow right is something that is super important. I would say if you have a neonatal rotation, then absolutely make the most out of it. Neonatal and also postnate. In fact, I would say that's arguably the easy one. So postnates is the rotation where you're with a peds team that basically goes to all of the well children. So these are like the newborns that don't have anything wrong with them. They're just going and checking after they've been born. And that rotation is basically all neonatal checks. So if you're ever on that, or if you have chat to swap into it or share it with someone, I would say that is like the best opportunity you will get to do newborn exams, because that's basically all they do. So if you go to the resident and say, hey, I've been practicing my newborn exam, can I do a couple? They're probably going to be fine with that because their entire job is doing that. So if your friend's doing one, share it around a little bit, say, hey, can my friend come and do some newborn exams on this day, whatever. Because that's really, really good experience. And then once you do it a couple times, you'll get the flow down. It'll be fine. I promise you, it will be fine. Acute assessment is new, so learn the resources that they put out for that. Just be aware that that's a different one. Yeah, that's most of what I have to say for peds. Anything the rest of you guys want to add?
No, I think that's really comprehensive, James. I guess the only thing I'll add is peds was probably one of the more, I guess it's a very enjoyable rotation in general, just because yes, the environment that you're working in, it's a bit more fun. Like you go into the wards and there's just stickers everywhere and toys everywhere, and it's a bit more of a fun environment. But of course, it does come with certain difficult situations. Obviously, kids are there for a reason. They're sick, and sometimes you can get really bad outcomes. And I think it's important just to make sure that you have really good expectations of what things are going to be like when you're actually on the rotation. Things are not always going to be really, really positive, but often the stories that you hear are extremely inspirational, and there's so much that you can learn from the patients as well as the staff. So I think that, while in terms of the studying aspect, as James mentioned, it's a bit more chill and you can sort of get through the matrix really, really easily, and you just have to memorize buzzwords, that sort of thing. I think there's still a heap of valuable communication skills that you can get out of the rotation, even if, from a content perspective, you've already moved on to studying like women's health or something. It's a really, really valuable rotation. That's the only thing I'd add. Cool. Fantastic. So speaking of the devil, obstetrics and gynecology. So the reason why I say the devil is because a lot of people, their mentality and approach to 4C seems to revolve around when specifically they have this rotation. A lot of people look at having this as first being more of a blessing, like they get to get this rotation out of the way. And then a lot of people who have it last, they're like, oh my God, I'm cursed. Like I have to do so much work at the end of the year. And I just want to kind of I want to say that yes, there is a foundation to that, because yes, there's like a ton of stuff you need to do on the rotation. There's a massive logbook that you need to get through. Like it can be really, really difficult. But one really, really amazing thing about obstetrics and gynecology is that there is so much of a mix between patient interaction and communication, like histories and exams, as well as the procedural side of things, where you can kind of really apply yourselves, get your hands dirty with like cannulas, catheters, ultrasounds, so much stuff that you can really get involved with, that actually you might find that it's quite enjoyable as long as you focus your efforts in the right spots. So as I said, some people describe it as very daunting and time intensive, but if you're prepared, it's really interesting. Some of the activities, kind of similar to any other rotation that you're on, include the wards as per usual. Some really like the clinics here can be quite diverse, but they can be treated as three categories. You've got the early pregnancy assessment clinics, you've got antenatal clinics, and you've got postnatal clinics. Theater again is quite split into gynecological procedures and cesarean theater. And then probably the most unique thing that obstetrics and gynecology comes in with is birth suite. So a lot of you may know now that you have to complete a certain number of hours in birth suite and have to get that checked off in the logbook, as well as some associated things that you need to try and get done during those suite hours. And that includes night shifts. So some hospitals may only allow you to do the morning shifts and the evening shifts. But sometimes you may have to make up for the fact that you have not seen certain things on those shifts by signing up to night shifts. And for some reason, really fun, wacky, interesting things seem to happen during those night shifts. So I would recommend, even if you're not a night person and you feel like you're just going to get tired by the time you're finished and you don't really want to do it, I would recommend just doing at least one, and you'll sort of get a feel for what I mean. Build really, really good rapport with the midwives. Especially, that's why I encourage you to do the night shifts, because during the night shifts, I think that usually the team is very chill. And sometimes that opens up a lot of opportunities to try certain things that during the day shifts, things might be so busy that you can't actually do that. So build really, really good rapport with not only the medical team, but also the midwives, because they will give you so many opportunities. Now, in terms of assessments, the main thing that I'm going to focus on is the logbook, but you also obviously have the APEX, the exam, and the OSCE, which I'll get to later. But the logbook seems to be a big pain in the butt for most people, because you're going to have to sign things off basically every week. Every single week, you're going to be getting so much stuff signed off. It's good to really pace yourself with this one. So I've broken this up to make things easier. I've broken it up into the setting in which you can get certain things done. That way, when you exactly what sort of achieve. So some of these things are a specific part of your logbook where you need to see certain procedures done, and you will see those, like there's such bread and butter conditions that it'll be very, very easy for you to observe. Even if you just spend a day, you'll probably see most of the things that you need to get ticked off. But other things that theatre is really good for is if you want to get a urinary catheter done and ticked off. I can't remember if you have to do one or multiple, but I'm pretty sure it's multiple. So it's really, really good to have, it's one. Okay. I'm not sure. Maybe it is one. Yeah, it's really, really good to try and find a setting where A, it's easy to consent patients. And B, that it's going to be happening very, very often, so that, a doctor won't mind if you pitch in. I know it's a really difficult and sometimes quite scary thing to consent a patient for a catheter. And even for yourself as a medical student, you might feel like you're not in the best position to keep this patient comfortable. But remember that you have I think you will have had a lot of teaching around this in terms of the theory. So you know exactly what to do. It's just about applying it to an actual person. And B, the main important things are going to be patient communication and making them comfortable, as well as just ensuring that your field is sterile, because this has to be a sterile procedure. In fact, during the APEX, when you're practicing doing like a catheter, for example, really the only reason that people fail is because they haven't maintained a sterile field. Everyone knows what to do. And even if you mess up the steps, you just have to restart and they're usually fine with it. But messing up the sterile field and not realizing it can be a really, really bad error to have. So I think this is a really important one to get down pat if you can. A similar thing with the speculum exam. You may have done catheters in third year. I personally didn't, but speculum is probably not something you will have done before. So this one you will definitely get teaching on. And if you are able to do this, it's a really, really worthwhile skill, because it only really takes a few minutes if you do it well, but you can really get a lot of information from your patients, especially those who really, really need it. So this is a really good place, again, in theatre to consent patients. Usually pre-op, they will need to have one of these or both of these done. So it's a really easy place to get them ticked off. In terms of wards and clinics, very self-explanatory. You will have logbook things where you have to sign off attendance to clinics, so just do that. Plus, you will have examinations that you need to perform. The antenatal examination is generally the one that's a bit longer, where you actually have to do, your bedside assessment, blood pressure. Then you have to feel the different borders of the fetus. You have to do a Doppler. Like, it's a bit more involved. But the antenatal clinician that you're with will walk you through it really, really easily. So that should be fine. It's also something that the APEX can examine. So just be mindful that you know the steps. Postnatal examination is, everyone that I've talked to, they say that there's no such thing as a postnatal examination. It kind of just depends on the setting that you're in and what's most important. So I guess for this one, when you're on the wards, just tell them, can I, examine a patient who's just delivered, and just tell me what sort of things I need to look for, like just the texture of the uterus from the outside. Like, it's just really, really basic things. It takes about 5 minutes. Birth suite. This is the one that people get really stressed about, because yes, you have a minimum of 20 hours that you need to complete in birth suite, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, if I spend 20 hours, I will tick off everything that needs to be done during birth suite. Unfortunately, or fortunately, there have been people who have spent like 8 hours, and in the first 8 hours, they've ticked off everything because it's been so eventful. But depending on the hospital that you're at, and obviously birth is a very unpredictable process. So you may have spent 20 hours and seen not much. But I would recommend that if you can, when you go into the birth suite for the first time, number one, familiarize yourself with the setting and where all the different rooms are, so that if they say like, oh, room 12, contractions have started, then you just know exactly where to go. You don't have to wait to follow someone. Second thing is when you're with the midwives, try and find someone who is that you can tell is really, really going to be good at teaching and is happy for you to follow them around, as well as grabbing their number if they're going to be on future shifts. Because what I found is that sometimes you find this really good person who you're following around, but then you lose them. And then you just give them your number and say, like, if we're looking after someone and you think that they're going to give birth soon or they're going to go to theater soon, just if you can, give me a quick call and I'll come. Right? Because sometimes the worst thing that can happen is that you followed a patient for 7 hours. And then at the seventh hour, when you're about to leave, or when you've gone somewhere else to look at another patient, that patient that you originally looked after is now going to give birth and you've missed it. So if you can kind of ensure that continuity, that makes things a lot better for you in terms of signing things off. Generally, cesarean sections, you can get signed off in the theater for like cesarean theater. Normal vaginal births, those can be really tricky to come across. Like it took me a lot of birth suites to get these signed off and to actually see them. But again, when you see one, I think you'll get an idea for why people say it's such a transformative experience. Like for me personally, it was such a big deal seeing this for the first time. And yes, you may only be observing it from a fair distance, but I think it's fair to say that, when you've seen one, it just changes your perspective on things in general without getting too philosophical. So it's really, really interesting to watch. Perineal repairs, again, usually around theater, but sometimes on the wards, they can do it if it's not a high grade tear. And CTGs, like everyone's on a CTG. So just ask one of the midwives to walk you through one, and that they should be 100% fine. The other pain in the butt for a lot of people is the apex. I think you only have 3 or 4 apex like categories that you can be asked about, but within each of them, they actually have a lot of subtasks, which can be really daunting because you have to do like 3 things at once. For me personally, it was like a speculum plus an antenatal exam and then plus something else. So like it can be really, really tricky. But I think the one thing to do, like that's really good, is that they actually give you a really, really specific rubric outline that you just need to follow step by step by step. And even if you miss like a very non-crucial step, like if you don't comment on something that you perceive as being really small, usually the examiner will help you out and they'll just say, oh, have you forgotten this? Have you forgotten that? And usually it's fine. Like a lot of people think that it's going to be really sterile and they're going to be really serious about these sorts of things. The only things they're going to be serious about is if you make the mock patient uncomfortable by doing something without consent or by doing something without the proper preparation. And the second thing is if you don't do things in a sterile manner. And if you don't do either of these without rectifying yourself later on down the track, then that would constitute a very bad error. But if it's something small that you've missed along the way, please don't stress out. Because during my experience, I know I probably messed up like 3 or 4 small things. But at the end of the day, once you get the feedback, that's what the Apex is for. Once you get the feedback, you can improve on it the next time you do it in practice. I won't go for too long because I know that I could speak on this for like hours, but some specific resources that were recommended to us from our 5th years when we were in 4th year, plus consultants. The main one is probably Monash Prompt. This one gets a lot of buzz because it's something that every final year cohort passes on as this sort of curse that, the 4th years have to hold on to. Because yes, Prompt is a really, really useful website because it has all the Monash Health guidelines on some of the common ONG presentations that you'll see and some of the common procedures and things you'll need to do. But I think a lot of people oversell how important it is that you get through all of these prompt guidelines. So yes, while some of the exam questions can rely a little bit on the guidelines, just know that if there is a particular piece of information on these guidelines that you normally wouldn't be able to find anywhere else, then I think it's fair to say that it probably won't be something that they will test you on, like that specific fact. If it's like something that just Monash Health does, and it's not listed anywhere else in the literature across any other Australian guidelines, then it's very unfair of them to test you on just something that Monash does. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And the way to get through this is to try and let your placement guide which one of these guidelines you refer to. There's probably like 50, 60 of them. When you see something on the wards, like if you see someone like an RHD negative patient being given a blood product, or if you see the movements that they have to do if someone is presenting in breach, and you're like, oh, what are the steps? If I was asked to talk about this, what are the steps to do that? Then just download the guideline from Monash prompt and just run a highlighter through it, like mainly through the main points or the important criteria that you need to know, just in case it comes up in an exam. And as you spend more time on placement, you'll know exactly which ones are important. But if not, just ask us. Because what I ended up doing, which is wrong, is I ended up not looking at prompt at all, because I thought, who needs prompt? Like everyone's like, I didn't listen to anyone else. I was just like, let's not do prompt. But then as we got closer to exams, I think I got really stressed, and I actually just ended up downloading like 50 of these guidelines. I compiled it all into a PDF, and then I ran through the entire thing like it was the Bible. So please don't do that, because that will be very stressful. So try and just pace yourself and find the ones that you think are most relevant in past exams. The other one that I personally found was good was the Royal Women's Health Guidelines. Really, it's more of a supplementary material, and I actually found that some of these guidelines had much nicer flowcharts that depicted the same thing. So I used to put these in my notes instead of the Monash prompt ones. And something that James mentioned previously is on Moodle, Jodie Keane, one of the consultants at Monash Health, she runs some really amazing, fantastic like revision lectures. I think they have recorded ones from our year level still up there, and they probably will update them as Jodie runs the live ones. I don't think they'll be very different to when we had them, but they're really, really good. Yes, they're a bit fast paced. So if you're in the habit of watching things at 2x or 3x speed, you probably will not understand a single thing. But if you can just prime yourself before the rotation by watching a few of these videos, and then at the end of the rotation, and then at the end of the year, I think she does a fantastic job of covering the major things you need to know for the exams. Shavi also runs a few FAQs. Some of them can be really good, and other times you might feel like, why does everyone know everything and I know nothing? Because sometimes it can get really complicated. But just know that, these two people at a minimum are there to support you if you have any major questions. So please try and turn up to the live sessions and just ask anything. Doesn't matter how stupid it is. It's better that it comes out during those sessions than later on down the track when you have exams or OSCEs. So sorry for going on for so long, but I think that obstetrics and gynecology sort of deserves a little bit more time because of how stressful it can be. But I'll pass it on to who wants to cover general practice. This is a fun one.
If I could just add one thing for OBS and Gynae there.
Yeah, sorry.
Was about the apex. If you just go, that's fine. With the rubric, so as Janam said, the rubrics are very thorough and they show you exactly what the gold standard is. What I would suggest is that first box in the rubric is something everyone skips over to get to the meat of it. But that first box is where they're going to fail you, which is communication and hand hygiene. And communication, you'll pick up on the words, and with confidence, it'll come. And it's much better to just over communicate than under communicate about what you're going to do in consent. But with hand hygiene, I would say be wary of the middle ground. So we've been examined on examinations a bunch, right? Where you sort of walk in, you do your hand hygiene, you do your exam, and then you do hand hygiene and walk out. And then on the other side is things like catheters, where it's completely sterile. And you do your hand hygiene and then you put on your gloves, and after that you can't touch anything. But I'd say be wary of things like speculums and other procedural stuff that happens at the bedside, which is not sterile, but it's still clean. And you need to be wary of your 5 steps of hand hygiene there, because that's something we do every year, but isn't really seen in practice much. But depending on your examiner, it varies from sites. I was in Bendigo, and over 50% of almost each thing group was failed over things like this. Was when you have your gloves on, you still need to keep notice of what you're touching, and it's different with the mannequin as well, because you're touching rubber. But if you do your best to imagine it's an actual patient and you're touching their genitals and doing a speculum, you won't then go back and touch a drawer and stuff like that. So it's important that middle ground is something we don't practice much. So as with all things, but especially with things like this, practice is key, because then it'll be second nature on what is going on with your hands, and then you can focus on the actual meat of it. But yeah, don't skip that first box when you go on the rubric, because when that comes up at the end of an apex, you don't want to be talking about that much. That should just be the baseline.
And one more thing I'll just add from my end regarding ONG as well. Usually they will ask you questions which are universal. So across guidelines, across different resources, it'll be the same. However, in recent exams, they have asked about very, very specific niche points in the prompt guidelines, like pertaining to the timings you might do a particular check for like a multiple pregnancy or a rhesus incompatibility pregnancy and things like that. So I would say like you'll get the vibe of what they'll ask you from the Zoom FAQs. Like they'll kind of almost leak it a little bit and tell you a little bit more about what they expect you to know. And that will tell you what prompt guidelines to refer to and revise on. But you unfortunately do have to remember things like timings of certain investigations and pregnancy visits. And so definitely do have a look at those. But what helps with those things is having a very clear timeline in your head of how that's going to work. And worst case scenario, if you don't revise those things, there are only a couple of questions like that anyways. So it's not a major deal, but just keep aware that they can ask you questions about very small, finicky details.
And I'll take GP, but I have two things of my own to add to women's, just in case it wasn't big enough already. So really, really quick. Number one, there is no formal postnatal exam, but if you ask either your, depending on who you're with, either if you're with midwives, ask them, or if you're with the ONG team, ask them about a day one review. It's basically the same thing. And they'll probably be able to sign you off on your postnat exam based on that, because it's the same general concept. It is an exam that is done postnatally. It's just not, a formal thing. And the other thing I'll say, just be really careful, especially with women's, be specific with the consent. Because I think a lot of the time you sort of go in with the idea of, oh, I'm just going to say, okay, are you happy for me to help out with the procedure? The patient doesn't know what that means. They don't know if that means you stand there and you hold like something in the corner, or it means you're scrubbed in and you're like holding, cutting suture or something. And for like both just women's health stuff in general and also especially births, it is very, very important that the patient understands what level of involvement you might have and consents to that. So it can be a good way to approach it. Can be there are different levels of involvement. So you can say, it's up to you to decide how involved you are comfortable with me being. So always say, the team will be in control. They'll be the ones handling the actual thing. But are you happy with me being there, with helping them with things and scrubbing and blah blah? So that sort of gives them the power to decide, but also leaves it open for you potentially being quite involved. And for things like speculum, whatever, you need to consent them for like passing a speculum, for example. And that like number one, being specific with that, and number two, meeting up with your teams, the reg or the resident or whoever, and being with them so you can ask the patient, in front of them or in a timely way is the best way to streamline you getting your logbook stuff signed off. Because it's very different asking the consultant, oh yeah, hey, by the way, like I asked to, can I do some stuff before? Can I do a speculum now? Very different from the registrars being like, hey, the medical student X consented the student for a speculum. Can they do it? And they say, yeah. Yeah, okay, that's all for me for women's. Let's talk about GP. About time. Amazing. So, I would say GD, like, obviously it's not the same acuity as ED, but I think you sort of learn the key skill of like undifferentiated patients here, especially if you do a lot of parallel consulting. And that's probably the most valuable thing you learn from here. So, there'll be a lot of sitting in on consults, and then sometimes parallel consulting, depending on how comfortable your GP is. And then there'll also be some performing procedures depending on what your GP is doing. So the vast majority of GPs will be very happy with you doing immunizations and like polio injections or whatever the hell. Because those are very straightforward. And it's good practice for you as well, because you don't really want to be an internship and like, I don't know how to give an IM vaccination because that looks very dumb. So absolutely jump at the chance to do stuff like that, because you'll be much more confident doing it as as an intern, as a doctor, or even in fifth year if you've already done it in fourth year. And GP is a very safe, non-threatening, non-high stakes environment to do it in. So absolutely jump at it. And really critical, especially to parallel consulting and also to procedures, is to come out the gate early. So you don't need to like get there the first day and be like, hi, my name is James, I'm a fourth year medical student. I'd really love a parallel consult. You don't need to tell it like that. But like once you've, established a bit of rapport in the first couple of weeks, you should flag, hey, down the line, if possible, I would like to do this in order to, develop myself. And you can ask them, are you happy with that? Are there things you want me to show beforehand? Are there ways I can show you that I'm ready for that? Blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is. If you tell them early and they have it on their radar, then you're much more likely to get to do it and to get to do it for a longer time and with better patience. And that will obviously be more useful for you. So it's a really great thing to be able to do. Try your best to, and you can do things to increase your chances of actually getting to do it. The exam is big, and I think like people, because women's is hyped up as like the big bad thing of fourth year. I think a lot of people sort of sleep on the GP exam basically. But I would hope the rest of the team would agree. Basically, it's the other big one. It's like there's women's GP, and they're almost like similar, frankly. And then there's Peds and Psych. Although Psych's a bit harder these years, but like GP is a huge, huge exam. And it's very management heavy, in my opinion. There's not much diagnosis stuff, so you might be familiar with the diagnosis side from third year. There's a little bit of that, but you need to be much more well-versed in what are we going to do about it. So anything that is big, anything that's like hypertension or diabetes or whatever, you need to know the guideline basically. And that's easy enough because the guideline is public. So you should be going to the RACGP, or the Australian Heart Foundation or whatever, the relevant guideline is, and learning that in depth. Because it may well come up on the exam. They do ask you questions like that. And yeah, overall, I would say that's a good approach. There are various resources you can look for it. A lot of the questions, sort of the general questions that you can get. So we mentioned earlier, like AMBOSS, EMEDICI. A lot of the time that can actually be quite useful. Because the sort of general medical stuff will cover a lot of the GP things, unlike the more specialized, women's or peds. There's that. GPSN has some decent resources that are a good summary, so a good way to look at it. Again, like we said, MUMIS has some good revision lectures that serve as quite a good structure. And I think especially with GP, there's a lot of ones out there where you can sort of build a bit of a framework and think, okay, how do I understand this topic? And the last thing, so if you guys have it the same way as we had it last year, your GP will all be run through Alfred and CCS, and you'll have teaching on, I think it's every Wednesday, same as the
Monday, Wednesday.
Monday, Wednesday, yeah. So like use the teaching basically is my takeaway there. Because it's good, and you will not get that level of teaching for any other thing in fourth year. It varies a bit on site, but like peds, they might give you a bit. There's a decent amount of tutes. Psych is really bare bones in the amount of teaching they give you at certain sites. And women's, you'll get some stuff from Jody and Shavi, but other than that, there's not a huge amount. Whereas GP, they actually teach you. So like take advantage of that. You don't know, like you're gonna miss it until you get to the other rotations. They're like, when are you gonna teach me what to do? And they say go away and learn it yourself. So absolutely use it, especially for the new stuff. Or the core concepts. So like big GP stuff or stuff like ENT and eyes that you haven't done so far, or even dermatology. They bring in some really good people, and you should absolutely go in and listen to those and learn from them, because they'll be a good way to do it. In terms of like the actual exam, a lot of the, like I said, so the domains are going to be similar to what you did in third year with those sort of topics. So I think I would argue the three sort of self-contained ones are eyes, ENT, and derm. Are the ones that sort of live on their own, and generally they'll basically have a quota. So there'll be like, up to 4 or 5 questions from each of those that they put in the exam. It is, unfortunately, I can't tell you how hard they will be, because some years they come out and they give you some really niche ones. Sometimes, like last year, I would say all of the Opthal ones I remember were very straightforward. I can't remember too much about the derm or ENT ones. But you will do, like, you can hedge a lot of your bets by learning the sort of key concepts for the main condition. So think, okay, cataracts and glaucoma for eyes, learning vertigo, very, very big for ENT. So if you learn those things and you have a working structure for them, then that gets you a long way towards actually being comfortable in the exam. The Apex, honestly, arguably, I would reckon it's very straightforward. It's very similar to year 3. Like, if you're doing an MSK exam in GP, it is essentially the same thing that you did when you were in year 2 or year 3 practicing those. So really just open that up. Eye and ear exams, they will tell you how to do and you should have resources of those. And really, it's the same thing. So I would say, honestly, I think the GP Apex is one of the least stressy ones. But like, make sure you actually learn them, because the last thing you want to do is go in without really having done any prep and then get there and realize you haven't got any flow because you haven't done this in like a year. So practice a little bit, make sure that you're comfortable, but once you are, you're fine. Anything from the rest of you guys?
Just to add to GP, yeah, like James said, the teaching's really good. For whatever reason, GP happened to be my highest scoring one. And I think that was like, I think it probably is, I would attribute it to two things. So one was my approach to learning conditions was very presentation focused, which is the way that they teach you in GP. So you don't necessarily learn conditions by themselves. You learn based on presenting complaints and then learning how to differentiate them through history, exam. And I think the second point I wanted to make was I had a big emphasis on learning investigations and management properly for conditions, even more so than like other parts of the condition. So it was mostly me focusing on approaches and investigations and management. So yeah.
Yeah, and I guess another thing as well, like same as with third year, right? Like you guys remember from your exams that literally would use images from Google search. So a similar thing here in fourth year as well. For all your conditions, go onto Google Images, have a quick scroll through, just see what it generally looks like, especially for like your ear exams, like what certain conditions look like in the ear. Same with imaging, like have a look at those conditions because you'll be surprised. But a lot of them do pop up like in the actual exam as well.
Yeah, and just to add on to the fantastic points that have already been made, just three quick things. One, kind of what James touched on with regards to the systems that you'll cover. It's kind of like the way that I treated it was that it's kind of like the third year matrix, but it's just flipped upside down. So the big systems that you will have covered in third year, you will just now focus on the more high yield things that you see in the community. So like you won't cover everything in cardio, but you will cover like hypertension as one of the main things. Same with like endocrine. You won't cover every single endocrine condition, but you'll cover diabetes to some fair extent. Whereas the conditions at the end of the year three matrix, like derm and ENT and eyes and that sort of thing, those will get expanded on a little bit more, and you'll have entire weeks on them. So it'll be like a little bit like learning a new language, and especially with derm, it was like learning an alien language for me. It was very daunting, but I think it's really good learning if you guys attend the lectures and things like that. For the first couple of weeks, you'll feel like you're learning the same things as you did in third year, to some extent, a little bit more detail. But then near the end, you'll learn about all these new systems and it'll feel very, very different. But trust me, these things are really important to know for the future. Like if you're describing a skin lesion, or if you need to do a basic thing like look at someone's ear, we haven't learned that yet. And it looks really dumb if we can't use an otoscope or a like those sorts of basic tools that doctors should know how to use. So I think it's really, really good learning if you are attending those sessions. The other thing with the teaching that's really good is it's not just didactic. Like you'll have the workshops where they'll have sim patients come in, or you'll have emergency workshops where you have to like at the Alfred Center, you'll have to talk with patients depending on where you're placed. So I think those sim patient ones were actually probably the most beneficial for me personally, because you actually practice your communication skills and examination skills in front of your entire group. And yes, while that sounds scary, it actually means that there's a lot of eyes on you so that you can learn from the feedback that is being provided by your GP supervisor plus your fellow colleagues. So it's actually really nice. And finally, with the parallel consults, again, a very scary thing to think about. But I would recommend, even if you're not feeling very confident, I would recommend broaching that idea from the second week onwards. Just because even if you feel like, I'm not really sure what I would do if a patient came in and asked for something, just remember that there are very basic things that you can do before that patient goes to see their actual doctor. Like you can do things like very basic things like just blood pressure, look inside their mouth with a light, look at their pupils, ask them basic questions about their history, which you would have done in first year and second year and third year. Like, remember that there are so many skills that you have. And yes, it might not feel like you're really achieving much for that patient in terms of the complaint that they've come in with. But there's a reason why your GP has allowed you to see that patient. It's probably because they know that that patient is, has been there for a long time. And they probably don't have anything so like very, very serious and urgent right now. So they think that it's probably a more valuable experience for you to sit down with them and just have a chat. So there have been times where I've been handed off patients and I don't even know what to do. and then I'll just be making small talk with them for 10 minutes before the GP is ready to see them. And so it seems like, what am I going to do for this patient? I'm not a doctor, but you really can achieve a lot. If not just building rapport, you can really find out some aspects of their story that even their GP was not able to figure out. So it is really, really valuable. Cool. Who would like to talk
Sorry,
about
one quick thing
psych?
as well regarding GP.
Yes.
Documentation you make is very important, right? Because you'll be given access to EMRs, paper notes, whatever, but the documentation you write is like essentially like legal, right? So like it has to be seen by the doctor and checked. But whenever you're also seeing a patient, make sure that you like do like due diligence. For example, if you're seeing a patient and they've got back pain and urinary incontinence, you can't just leave it there and sort of brush it aside. You have to like check if they've got quarter equina, for example. Like you want to rule out your red flag symptoms. So when your learning conditions then approaches, look at your red flag symptoms, but also when you're like presenting the patient to your GP, check with them what should I be excluding so that you don't have the patient leaving the clinic without having those red flags addressed.
Amazing. I'm happy to take this one because I wrote it unless somebody else wants to grab it. Easy. Okay. So I forgot I wrote that. Yeah, look, psych is an important thing to understand, if only because it means that you will hopefully not place any dumb psych consult. Because you will hopefully have been the med student on the consultant liaison team with psych, going to see some ridiculous consult and being like, yeah, the patient's sad because they have very reasonable reason to be sad because you cut up their leg off. So you need to know psych because you will encounter psych no matter what you do, no matter what clinic you go into. When they ask you about the past medical history, significant portion of people will be will either have a mental health issue or they may also be on medication for it. So not only do you need to understand psych, you definitely need to understand psych medications, because a lot of the time when you're giving a drug, it will be to someone who has those. So I think in terms of like how to approach the rotation, you do actually need to learn the sort of the foundations of psychiatry in terms of the actual conditions. It's an interesting one in that most of the there's very little sort of flow in terms of like what you're used to with like the investigations and what confirms the rules out or blah blah blah. It's very based on just what are the characteristics and what are the diagnoses because of the nature of psychiatry. So your job is now to learn what are the characteristics. And very importantly, I would say like probably the most important skill and the one that's less obvious is that you really need to understand the nuances of how to differentiate stuff that looks similar. So if someone's presenting with cognitive decline, you need to be able to say they have dementia versus they have delirium versus they have an acute mental issue. Okay. That is really important because that's the sort of question they give you in the exam to catch you out. They'll very rarely just give you like a random diagnosis out of nowhere. It'll be like you will know it's one of these. The question is, can you in your head prove that it is this one, for example? So that is the sort of thinking you need to get used to. Not so much you're not going to have any ones that it's like, oh, they put in like this little buzzword for this one symptom, and that means it's definitely X diagnosis. Not really. It's really very much a like balance the probability. How do I get the most likely one? I used the website PsychDB, just because the DSM is free, it's online, you can get it. It's a pain to navigate. It is terrible. It's not even like properly organized. And so I barely ever use the actual DSM because there are plenty of sites out there like that one that use the literal DSM content but put it in a more easy to view format. So don't torture yourself with the actual DSM PDF. In terms of Apex, so I think the biggest thing is like a lot of it is just like learning to do certain assessments. So your MSE, your risk assessment, MMSE and Mocha and all that is honestly quite chill because they will just give you the sheet. And really it's just walking through it. So just count yourself lucky if you get that one, really. But learning MSEs and risk assessments, I think, are the hardest ones in Psych. And the best thing you can do for that is actually practice it. So and you can do it with anyone, right? Because the beauty of this is that you don't need to read notes, you don't need to read like results. You can literally just sit there. You don't need to ask it. No MSE, no Mocha. So they took it off. Yeah, okay. I can understand why they took it off because it was very easy. I remember I walked into my Psych Apex and they had the Mocha there. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. And I just ran through the entire thing and I sat there for like 5 minutes because I was afraid of ending it too early, and we just made small talk with the guy. Yeah, it was a joke. So okay, well, RIP to the like quarter of you guys that would have got an absolute easy exam, but you can still learn the actually useful ones. So with risk assessment, so you have to just that's mostly about domains of risk, so understanding what are the different types of risk we can have and who those risks apply to and are more likely for, and how to triage risk, like what actually represents a high risk versus a low risk. And the other thing is MSc. So literally the beautiful thing about the MSc is you don't have to ask any questions. You can just sit there, watch them ask questions, and you can write your own MSc. I would literally do that on Psych pretty much all the time. I just had a little notebook and I would just write down my little template, appearance, behavior, speech, thought, blah, blah, blah. I'd write it down. And then if, depending on what rotation was, if I had time, I would just go to the resident or the reg or whatever and be like, hey, can I just, oh, you don't even need to ask them. Like, so they'll write up an MSc most of the time to know. So you just look at that and you think, okay, what did I have right? What did we agree on? And what was different? And if you do that, honestly, you will get really good at it really quickly because it's very much a practice skill. Like, don't stress about trying to remember everything straight away. As you do it again and again, you'll start remembering. You don't need to memorize all the thought content form, blah blah. It will come more easily to you once you think about, okay, well, obviously content's going to be delusions, but in hallucinations, blah, blah, sorry, delusions. And, perception is going to be hallucinations and auditory and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Anything from you guys?
Yeah, okay, cool. I was like, oh, Deepak is gonna go. Nah, okay. The only other resource that I would recommend, aside from like obviously I didn't touch DSM because I just thought it was like as James said, it's so convoluted and obviously it's very, very long. It has stuff in there that we don't really need to know. PsychDB was pretty good as an online resource. The only other one that actually Monash provides, like for the first time, Monash giving us something like kind of spoon feeding us with all the information that we need is actually their Moodle page for Psych. Because they actually just have a bunch of modules on there that covers the matrix that you have in order. Like every single thing that you need to know is on those Moodle pages. So trust me, if you are feeling like you're stuck and you don't really know where to look, and sometimes it can feel like that with a lot of these psych conditions, like you look through the resources that you used in third year and you might not find some of these conditions even listed. The Moodle page is fantastic for that. So please do look at those modules if you can, and it doesn't take that long. You just need to space it out as much as possible. The other thing with psych is, I think James mentioned this already, the psychopharmacology aspect of things can get really tricky and confusing. Even though I think on your matrix, it's like R3 or something like that, I still think it's quite important and often tested in exams just to even know like basic stuff like the mechanism of action of how these medications work and common uses for them, especially your antipsychotics and like the buzzwordy side effects of some of these antipsychotics. Like it's just really important to try and nail these if you can. That's probably like that plus kind of knowing the criteria for how to diagnose certain conditions. Those are probably like the two most important things that you need to get out of psych. Once you've gotten those, what I did was like once I nailed that, I was like, cool, psych is done now. I'll continue to learn things on the wards, but now I can move on and learn about another matrix that is probably going to take me a little bit longer. So it's not to say that psych is like a breeze and it's super easy, but I think it takes a little bit less time to cover the ground that you need to cover for your exams. And then usually you'll feel confident enough that you can move on to another matrix that you can study.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just mostly wanted to say that, especially the part about Moodle being really good. I think faculty did a pretty good job, so make sure you make use of that. And what Janum said about pharmacology, I found SciSom, which is the interest group from Monash, pretty good for pharmacology because they do mode of action and side effects and stuff like that pretty well. So the resources were really good. So it was really just those two that I used, the Moodle page and the SciSom stuff.
I might just add one more thing. Thanks guys for talking. We've done a lot about sort of the hard skills of psych, which is like the pharmacology and how to do the apex and the exam and answering questions. I think where psychiatry really got me was the soft skills of psychiatry because it's the one rotation where sort of your whole system to approaching a patient kind of falls apart because you can't use your WWQQAA on them because don't have physical pain most of the time. So the psych history, which at a minimum in your psych rotation, you'd have to do twice, once during the case report patient that you see, and once during your APEX if you get an MSc. But ideally you do more. And what I'd recommend is one, either on Ben Amberg, he has an approach to doing a psych history, and two is, I just blanked out. Where was the second one? I think it was on Best Buds. But essentially where it gets interesting is in your normal medical history, when a patient sort of says, oh, I don't really want to talk about that, or my father passed away, and then you say, sorry to hear that. Anyways, how do you drink alcohol? That's where the psych history starts. And you sort of keep pushing them further and further to the point where you get really uncomfortable with the questions that you're asking, because that's where a lot of the MSc and the risk assessment and stuff like that it comes from, is what their emotions are and what they're thinking about. So practicing that. And oh yes, sorry, the other resource is in your psych discipline guide. You'll have a few pages about the assignment, and over there there's a bunch of questions that are sort of what you're going to write in your case report, and a bunch of things that you need to include in your case report. And that is essentially what a psych history is. So you're asking about their family, you're asking about their childhood, about their development, you're asking them about their emotions. And when they say that they're feeling sad, you keep asking them, why are you feeling sad? Why do you think this happened? Why do you think you've reacted in this way, and stuff like that? So I'd say practice that as much as possible. You'll do it for a long time in your assignment. When I sat down with the patient for my psych assignment, the case report, it was like a good hour and a half long conversation. So stuff like that, that's where it gets really interesting. But yeah, build on it. And then at the end of the day, when you have your APEX or your OSCEs, you just have a bunch of questions that you need to get done in terms of risk assessment, asking them about suicide risk. And if you haven't asked anyone about that, they'll know, because asking somebody if they're going to commit suicide or if they've thought about killing themselves is something that takes practice. And the first time you ask it, it will come out weird. And until you get that confidence to do it by talking to multiple patients or same patients or practicing with friends, it won't be comfortable.
Absolutely agree with you, Ajay. I think that psych is probably the best place to practice your patient communication skills, especially when you're talking about sensitive things, because that is essentially what psych will focus on. It's basically like 90% talking. So it's a really, really good space to practice that if you can. Awesome. So second last part, this is probably we'll try and keep this a little bit short, because I realize that we're already at 8:20. We don't want to make this one of our typical, oh, it's going to be 1 hour, but then it turns out to be 2 hours sessions. So we'll try and keep this one short. So this is basically the section where each of us will talk about how we studied, and why we recommend certain things and why we wouldn't recommend certain things that we did. So I'll just start us off very quickly. How I studied. And at the top, you'll see kind of the rotations that we had to give you a bit of context in terms of maybe how stressed we were throughout the year or what sort of commitments we had. But essentially, my approach to studies in fourth year was quite different to third year. As some of you may know, in third year, I was really a big fan of sitting down and writing out these really like aesthetic, nice looking notes. I did make them and then release them for people to use as study resources, and I found that people actually really liked using it, which is probably why it was so depressing when I said, oh, I don't have any fourth year notes that I've made in the same way. And really, what I'm saying is not just that I didn't have these notes, I just didn't make notes in general. And that was a very different thing for me. And I guess the main motivation was because the study methods that I was using in third year were very time consuming. Sitting down and writing out all of these things, I realized that I wouldn't be able to do that with 4 specialties now instead of just 1 matrix. So instead, I tried to focus more on consuming that information and trying to summarize it in an efficient way, rather than really sitting down and forcing myself to color code things and make things look pretty and having nice diagrams. So I guess the steps that I used, which I would, again, I'm not saying this is like if you're taking notes, then you should stop. Please do if you are able to keep up with it. But if you're not and you're struggling, just know that I've been through that and many people have. And the process that I now use is a lot more time efficient, a little bit less stressful. And yes, there might be some trade-offs in terms of the things that I'm gaining out of it, but I think it covers a lot of ground. So number one, the step that I use is I like to collect a lot of information from a primary source, or at least a few primary sources. And then I usually annotate that with my own notes or diagrams. So I know there's a lot of resources that people use, like the BMJ, ETG, Amboss, Osmosis. Like there's a lot of like sort of primary or pseudo primary sources that you've relied upon for third year that you can still use in fourth year, plus the guidelines that are specific to each of these specialties. And then just using things like YouTube or like Google Images to look for pretty diagrams that you can add on to these documents. So I literally just open up my tablet, and then I'll just download the document, make a few highlights in places that I think there's important things, add on a few diagrams that I think are useful from other resources or from revision lectures. And then that's it. Like that's the extent of what my notes look like. And then I'll just download them and keep it in some sort of repository. The main benefit of this is I spend less time on collecting that information and analyzing it, and more time on actually trying to make something useful out of it. So the way that I would do this is, obviously PS Platypus has been influential, like very influential in the way that I digest information, because by teaching I learn, and I'm trying to apply that to how I learn in general. So I try and teach the content that I've just learned to someone, whether that's during the day that I learn it, or in 1 week after, or a month after, kind of spacing it out. I think that's really, really helpful. And sometimes I won't have a physical person to talk to, so I just grab a plushie or something and I'll just speak to the plushie. I have a whiteboard, so I pretend that like I'm delivering a sort of PS Platypus session to my plushie, which is a bit sad if you think about it, but it actually does work. And so I have this sort of these teaching sessions every night. And I also try and find some question banks if I can to actively test this knowledge. And the other thing that it took me a long time to get over is trusting my brain to retain this information. I always felt like I needed to learn everything to death, and then only I will feel satisfied to move on to the next condition. But what I realize now, after talking to so many clinicians and other med students and just thinking about it myself, I realize that if there's something really important, I will come across it dozens of times, and I will learn it through pattern recognition, like the most important things. Aside from the things that you shouldn't forget, like emergencies, if there's like a small detail about a medication, or if there's a pathology finding for another condition that you feel like you're not going to remember, it's probably because it's not important to you right now. When it does become important, you will 100% remember it. So I had to trust my brain that it's okay if you don't remember this thing. When it does come to it, you know exactly where to look, and then you'll remember it. So I guess I put there in small text as well, something important. Try to shift your focus more towards placements. Be very naturally curious, sort of write down things during the ward round that you think you want to read up on later, and constantly ask questions. You might feel like you're annoying someone, but really you're there for your learning. So please do that as much as you can. I also got a message about whether I will be releasing that repository that I mentioned. I'm actually not really sure about that, because it's got resources there that I don't even know if I'm allowed to like send that out, because some of it is like supposed to be paid resources, I think. But I'm gonna have a look and see if I can send that, because I think that it might be quite instructive for anyone who wants to follow this pathway. But again, if I'm not able to, that's okay. I'll put out a guide for what that looks like, so you can replicate that in your own studies. Cool. I've probably talked for way too long. Let me pass it on to Jay.
No stress. So, I guess the basic thing is thinking about how to optimize your resources a little bit. So this work goes for third year as well, and you hopefully learned a little bit this last year. But like, you don't want to be going for the things that are super in depth or aimed at patients or whatever, and then dredging through it for the good stuff. You want to pick something that you know is fairly comprehensive and fairly on target for Monash, and stick with that. So prompt is very good. I will say, I feel like, I don't know, for me at least, and for the people I talk to, the prompt, like, don't get lulled into a false sense of security with prompt, because I know a lot of people who learned prompt guidelines and like it did not help them very much in the exam at all, because frankly a lot of the questions on our exam didn't have much to do with prompt. So it's not quite as simple as if you learn it, then you'll get like 20 of the questions on the exam right straight away, because they're just prompt. But at the same time, that is a good baseline for learning things. RCH is great for all the children's stuff. I already talked about RICGP. And then yeah, student made summary resources. So I will swear by VesBuds, like the and also the very summary stuff. I just posted a psych one, and honestly, that was like my source for all the psych. It's still my source for all the psych stuff because it's just like perfect, honestly. Um, but yeah, so look at the summary resources. I think, like I said, a lot of that is useful right at the start to give you, I think Deepak phrased it really well, to give you sort of a skeleton, a structure that you can then build the content into. Um, like Janum said, active recall, massive, huge. Because there's a lot of content, you know, and the biggest thing for understanding how like getting a read of how much you actually know is that. And that's not quite as simple as just doing flashcards. As much as I know we love flashcards and they are useful, they're super useful. Hypocritical of me because I'm also releasing flashcards. But while they are useful for buzzwords and they are very useful for them, they don't necessarily help you with the understanding, so especially with things like women's, where a lot of the time the question requires you to actually have some critical thinking about how to manage the situation. A better way to approach that is not only to just use flashcards, but also throw cases at yourself. So think, okay, what do I do in X situation? You know, what are my options? What would I change if this was different? What do I care about? Because the setup of a lot of questions in the ONG exam is basically, you know, you have such and such scenario, there are these little complications, there are these details, what are you going to do? So you need to know what you care about and what you don't care about and use that to make a decision. And feel free to ask lots of questions. I mentioned reading around what you saw before. My personal thing is that acronyms there's like some acronyms that are great and a lot of acronyms that are terrible. If you get to the point that you're just remembering the acronym and not what it stands for, then you've gone too far. I think acronyms ideally should be very short unless you're going to use them all the time. So if it's something that you're going to do like literally every single time, um, I would say go ahead, you know, do your big unwieldy acronym. But if you're trying to remember like stuff like lithiums for, you know, side effects of lithium, I don't know about the rest of, maybe these guys have better memories than I do. But by the end, I was just remembering lithium. Like I couldn't actually remember any, you know, it didn't actually help at all in remembering side effects. So be wary of those. And yeah, so spaced repetitions, I would say like, um, who is it? Nirma. She would have still been teaching when you guys went through. I think she's still around. But she said after a lecture in like first year, which is still stuck by me now, like everyone understands it after the class. You will always understand a topic. You guys are all smart. You will always get a topic like the hour after you learn about it. The challenge is knowing about it in a week, in a month, in you know, at the end of the year. So work that into your revision. So think about, you know, you can look at every, you know, every week, every month or whatever, look back at the stuff that you revised and think, do I still get this? Because you don't want to be in a situation where you learn it really well, you do a lot of fancy stuff and then you forget it. And ideally the amount of revision you need to do will go down over time. So it's more like sort of just watering the garden, just remembering, you know, jogging your memory, reinforcing those little pathways. And if you do that, then you'll save yourself a lot of cram time. Um, Start exams early, I think, is a good thing because you often like the way you revise when you aren't thinking about the exam structure, you're sort of in the wild. You don't really know what they're asking, what they care about. So if you do those early, you will have a good idea. And yeah, start early always. Yeah.
Cool. I'll talk about a bit about how I sort of approached year four. So the first thing is with regards to clinical skills, um, because you're going to have your Apex, your OSCEs, it's really important that you do learn those clinical skills examinations you would have never seen in third year. So really attend those sessions or I guess placements where you're going to be able to practice those. So like antenatal clinics, heaps of blood pressures, antenatal examinations. So really go to those. Same with GP clinics. So really prioritize learning the basics like a blood pressure. Like you have to really be able to do that when it comes to the end of the year or your apexes. So yeah, use your time, your valuable time as widely as you can. And then don't feel guilty about taking time to study as well. So a lot of people have also like messaged in the chat about, you know, not having time to study with how busy placement is. And I do understand with some of the rotations, it's kind of hard to sneak off without arousing a lot of suspicion. So in that case, maybe, stay back for a bit. But then usually the consultants, or probably the regs will understand that, you have your med school exams ahead of you, so they'll let you head off. But if not now, then in a later rotation, you can always find some more time to fit in a bit more study and a bit more revision. Just keep that in mind as well. And then also having a clear timeline for the conditions or guidelines. I could not, for the life of me, remember any of the women's health like timings and random weeks that you have to memorize for certain investigations. So I just decided to sit down and draw it all out, because having a flow chart for a lot of these conditions, like knowing if this happens, we have to do this, and we have to do it at this many weeks, it's really valuable to be able to see that. So I made flowcharts for ONG mainly. So stuff to do with all the prompt guidelines. And that really helped me when it came to the exam, when they asked me a very specific question about like a timing of a guideline. And just because, I'd written it up, I knew that I could recall it. So again, it's not essential to memorize that level of detail, but at least having done it once, you know that somewhere in your head, so that when you're looking at answer options that are wildly different, you know the ballpark of what you're going to be aiming for as the answer. Next thing is test yourself throughout the year. So you have eMedici, you have past papers, you have so many questions. It's going to be impossible to do all of them in SWOT unless you really push yourself, which we hope you won't. So try and do those throughout the year rather than leave it all till the end. Some of the really old past papers, you can literally just do those while you're on the placement, because they're not going to be very useful for your end of year exams, but they're just going to be like a nice little throwaway untimed test you can do to test what you know about PED so far, about ONG so far. And then every time you get a question wrong, you read up on that particular area, and now you know that answer for when they ask you that on the wards or when they ask you it again in an exam. So really try and learn from those old exams, eMedici, and yeah, spend your time wisely.
All right, okay, my turn. So, I think in terms of learning medical school, I think having a general sense of what learning is incredibly valuable. I'm just going to quickly run through this, but I hope that this is valuable to some people. Like I said, at the start of the rotation, I did past medicine / eMedici plus just overview lectures, or just getting a general sense of what was happening. And you can see my rotation list in the top right. So I started with ONG, which is why I was sort of forced to reassess how to study for this year. So the broad brushstroke of what learning is, in my opinion, is you're basically trying to consolidate understanding that someone else has in your own words. And that process is called encoding, which is, you might have heard on YouTube, on like education YouTube and stuff. And you're trying to encode information into your brain in a way that makes sense to you. And you're trying to recall it over and over again and apply it to different scenarios. And the number of reps you do of those two equals how confident you will be with your knowledge. And the learning comes, at least for me, through like lectures, modules. I have a brief list of stuff that I think was probably the highest yield. I always found ONG to have a lot of information gathering. So that was very time consuming, purely because the learning part was sometimes contradictory. You would look at US guidelines, and that would always be very messy. So you just be careful with finding a few primary sources, like what Janam mentioned in his slides. Psych has Moodle modules. PEDS has RCH, which is really good. And GP, I learned around each week's content, which was excellent and worked out really well for me. And reps is essentially, you're trying to either use flashcards or some sort of spaced repetition mechanism to learn or consolidate your knowledge. And the next slide. Okay, so here comes, so this is my huge pitch into RemNote, right? So this is why I'm so passionate about RemNote as a tool for learning. So Jenna, you can just keep clicking through. So it's not a plug because I'm not getting anything out of it. So basically you just make a condition, you can apply a template, and there we go. After applying that template, I know exactly what I need to fill in and what I need to know for this. And click, click, click. If I want to do pathophys, I can do steps of OA, osteoarthritis, right? And then I can double click to make a flashcard right there. So I'm already consolidating my knowledge and creating a way that will instantly allow me to repeat what I'm learning, right? In my own words. So this is all knowledge that I've gotten from the outside. I've created it in my own way, and then I'm doing it. And then now this is the way that the flashcard looks like. So I can go to I can open the flashcard and then I can start working on it. Click, 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 click. Okay, nice. Yes. Okay, and this is what my osteoarthritis thing looked like in third year. And there's only 18 cards in it. It was very readable to me because I was the one who made it, and I made it really quickly. So that was helpful and minimized a lot of the time I spent studying. Click, 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 click. Okay, so this is what part of medical school that I think is lacking, which I think is a shame that it is. We rely on our seniors, like PSPs, to help us get a sense of what this year would be in terms of knowledge content. But I think that a lot of content can be shared amongst ourselves if done properly. And collaboration in medical school within your own year group is something that is underappreciated and potentially could be really good. So I'm interested in starting a group of people, PSPLAT alumni. If you want to reach out to me, especially, okay, so the pitch is essentially, you can make groups in RemNote where we can share our own notes about conditions that we have. And I'm keen on making sort of like a study group where we collaborate within our year group. Yeah, PSPLAT puppies, yeah. And with the eyes of well, I'm doing it honestly right now. So with the eyes of someone who's already been through this process, hopefully I can help you get a sense of where you should put your attention and what, and I can share my notes as well. And if you click, so you might have heard of Toronto Notes, which is, I think it's the University of Toronto or whatever. So they have their own notes that they publish every year, student-made and peer-reviewed by doctors. It's excellent. It's really, really good. One of my favorite Regis told me to use this, and I used it for the whole of third year. It was brilliant. Obviously, it uses the guidelines that they use there, which is why it's a bit difficult to adapt into fourth year because fourth year is pretty management focused. So my goal, or something that could be cool, is facilitating a sort of a culture of collaboration until we can create this ourselves. So if I'm looking for at least 5 people who are interested, and I'm keen on starting with ONG specifically, because that is one where you need to gather information from multiple sources, and putting it into one place for people in a high quality environment will be pretty valuable in my opinion. So if you're interested, please reach out to me in any way you can. And yeah, they have a bunch of books. It's pretty cool. Okay, thanks guys.
Jeez, that's so, I don't even know how to follow that. That was so well spoken. I want these notes and I'm done with fourth year. I'm not looking back at it. Okay, so a lot of resources have been mentioned. I think my main thing was sort of about placement. There might be some contradicting things where people say, I'm not going to placement, but I saw fourth year sort of as a stepping stone from third year to fifth year in multiple ways. One way is how much you get integrated with the team. So there's no third years, there's no fifth years, there's not many other students around with you, and you become part of the team following through with patients. What also makes it different is that these are specialties. So peds, ONG, psych are specialties, and we're learning the specialty content from the resources that doctors use. And so that makes, what was different in third year was it was much more focused on sort of histories and exams and clinical reasoning and stuff like that. But as people have said, fourth year is a management year where a lot of the focus is on getting to management and guidelines and stuff like that, which you didn't really have to do in third year and you would get through it. So as part of that note, being part of the team and engaging with placement with a sense of curiosity and following through with patients, these are honestly, it doesn't matter if these are like careers that you want to go down, but just approaching it with the mindset that this is something that we get to experience. I mean, whether it's childbirth and obs and gynae or psychiatry is something that a lot of people have a perception about, but I feel like once you get into it, and it really depends on the kind of person who is talking to you about psychiatry, can be something really fascinating because it's about the mind and how little we know about the mind and how multifaceted it is. So approaching with the mindset of like simple things, like you get to go to placement and see the patients and these are very holistic specialties, which we've talked about the overlap before, the amount of obs and gynae and peds and psych that you'll see in GP and vice versa. And so following through with patients, asking them questions, asking the patients questions about their experiences and asking the doctors questions. With mindset, it sort of comes to sort of the fake it till you make it mentality, and that's sort of twofold. One is the confidence. There will be a lot more instances in fourth year, sort of being the only student there, that you get pushed into the deep end, as you might have compared to what you might have had in third year, and being a more senior student in the team. And so faking it till you make it, there will be instances where you have no idea where to go and what to do next. And in those instances, it's important to just fall back to what you know, in terms of the structure. So basic, just, hi, what brings you in today? Hi, my name is this. Tell me about your experience. Where is the pain? What is, just being curious about the patient. Doesn't matter if it's medical or not, just asking them about their experience. And then eventually you'll find something that you can go off. And you, with the resources that we've mentioned, most of the times you'll have a computer with you in front of you when you're talking to a patient, and you can, if you know how to navigate it, you can come up with the next questions to ask. The other part of mindset, the other part of faking it till you make it, is sort of just faking that excitement and just sort of a bit of passion about being at placement and being interested in what you're seeing, the curiosity, whether it's really there or not. But having that little bit of curiosity makes placement a lot more bearable to go, especially when you have attendance and you need to go 5 days a week. That can make it a lot more exciting to go on. Looking after yourself is a big thing. The reason fourth year has this reputation as being a hard year is the attendance becomes a big aspect, which I'm not sure if it's changing next year or not, if they're becoming more realistic with it. But that's what was missing in third year, was attendance usually wasn't as severely tracked. But also the conditions and the like textbook study that you need to do, the volume of that is still there, which then becomes less in fifth year. So fourth year is sort of both of those. And so having a GP that you go to, seeing if you need a therapist, getting a referral, even if you don't think you need one, go have a chat. You know, Medicare is there for a reason. A friend's family, having someone to debrief with, as Deepak mentioned, you become closer with your team. You see them more as colleagues. So asking them for a debrief after something that you might have seen that impacted you in a way becomes less daunting in fourth year. Another thing that I'd like to mention is sort of taking time off. So there's a lot of stuff, and it's important to know that you have a year to get through this, or 9 to 10 months. And taking an evening or even a day off a week is not gonna derail you as much as you think it will in the moment. If you go work out at the gym, no, you're not supposed to work out 7 days a week, because you should at least have one rest day in the week. And that can be applied to anything in your life, and it should be applied to studying. And the taking an evening off or taking a day off a week where you don't think about study at all, you go out with friends, you just chill at home. If that makes you more energized the next time you do go to placement or the next time you do study, that's going to have a much bigger impact 6 months from now, because fourth year isn't something that you're going to cram at the end. You will cram some buzzwords in September, but it is something that you start early, you go slow, and it's a fun year because you learn a lot about yourself in terms of how you balance placement and study and life outside of that, because that's important as well. Understanding rotation requirements is fine. You'll get to know the assignments and the logbooks, and organizing a handover from the previous group is always useful, because we can say we obviously haven't covered everything in this, even though it's going on for 2 hours. Resources have been covered, amazing by everyone. The only thing I would add is I used Ben Amberg in third year, and he also has fourth year notes. And at the end of the day, they are old, but I'm comfortable with the format. I knew the way he wrote. If you use Ben Amberg in third year, it's a solid starting point, because he writes in a certain way that you already are comfortable with, and so you might as well start from there. Same thing with the PSP, so start off with what's Monash Taylor, everyone's been through this. he also had good formats for your emergency obs and gynae management and stuff. Definitely recommend going through that. And then yeah, POSMED and eMedici. I'd say POSMED later in the year when you know a little bit more about management, because there will be questions on POSMED where the management is just completely different to what we do in Australia, and you don't want to be learning off of that in the first go. But say SEM 2, you'll have a little bit more of an understanding of this is what I want to take away from a question, and this isn't the management I've seen before, so I'm going to ignore this part of the explanation and just focus on the clinical reasoning, which is the same anywhere in the world. Cool.
Awesome. So in terms of how I survived fourth year, there's as everybody noted, a lot of good resources out there. I don't think we need to touch upon those. Things made by the student community, such as the WISM, SciSom, Muppets, as well as BezBuds, are all really good resources to have a read and watch of, especially in the early days, as they give you that backbone, which you can build up all your knowledge upon, which makes revising them a lot easier as well, especially with an ONG. Once you understand the timeline of what happens from basically conception all the way down to giving birth, you can then slot in each individual condition in between those, as well as the certain nuances that occur when things go wrong or certain things crop up. And then that gives you something to have to always refer back to and see the interlinkings between the conditions and how one certain complication can lead to another, and that can jump on, and how that has a knock-on effect all the way until the end of giving birth and whatnot, as well as follow-up. And then you can also notice nuances that occur where ONG actually flows into children, then children flows into GP as individuals grow and so on. In terms of adjustments to year 4, studying is extremely self-directed, unlike that of 3B where you're getting a funnel of information with your tutes 2 a week from just your bedsides, as well as surgical tutors, and your Wednesdays just full of lectures from 9 to 5. In my experience, where I did most of my 4C year at MMC, I got basically no teaching except on GP. So where you do get formalized teaching, utilize it well, because there is far and few between. They're the times where you should really try and knock out certain ideas that you don't really get, but also lean into the teams that you are on, because you are often the only person present. So everybody there is doing their jobs, but they're also always very happy to teach you as well. So lean into them, ask them concepts, things that you can't really understand and can't seem to get out of the books, as some of them do require that nuance. And having been in that specialty for a long time, they do give you quick dot points of good guiding principles to get through. In terms of attendance, utilize that 80% mark effectively, take time off. 4C is a hard and quite isolating year. In terms of ways to do that is, if you do have certain days that are rostered for clinic only in the morning, those are good days that you can take off if you have the capacity to do so with that 80% mark, as a day off is always nicer than having a half day. And because you're given the scheduling beforehand, usually in the form of a Google Sheet, you can see where other students are and the gaps within clinic time slots where you can try and swap into them, as usually they don't check for what clinic you went to, but more so that you went to the certain amount of clinics at the end of the week. And they do that as based off a tally, as opposed to looking at the specific clinics and whether or not you have attended. Following on from that, isolation is definitely a big part of it, unlike in third year where you do meet your friends after every tute, after teaching, and on your ward round, you often have a ward buddy. In fourth year, sadly, it's not the case. So make sure you keep up with what you find fun And if you don't have anything to if you don't have anything that you find fun, find things that make your life more fun. Get interested in other things because you're gonna need them in the tough times to get you through.
All right. I don't think Kyle could be with us tonight, but I will. Actually, no, Deepak, you said you would do this in Kyle's voice, or was that a joke?
That was supposed to be a joke, but yeah, you can take it. It's fine.
Yeah, okay. I'll try and do it justice. Yeah, so Kyle's advice, I'm literally just gonna read it off. I don't know what else to do. So take it a day and
maybe leave that for in their own time if they're just gonna read off the
yeah,
slide.
true.
Just I'm conscious about
Maybe just
time.
read this. I think his main points were just I think the main thing was actually the thing in bold, which is do only what you must enthusiastically and then do what you want to do. So that's kind of what I touched on before with regards to you're not there to do jobs, you're there to learn. So if someone is telling you like, oh, you got to like your only thing to do this day is like to, call this specialty and ask them to review this patient, and then you finish that and then you don't actually get to do anything yourself, like that's actually going to be valuable. Then try and set expectations where you actually get to do those things first. And then, yes, if there's other tasks and you want to be involved, sure. But there's no stress or there's no expectation for you need to sort of do that because it's sort of their job and they're getting paid to do that. Yeah, and don't overthink the rotation order, which is I think what Deepak was mentioning before. Just take things as they come, and don't be scared if you have a certain rotation that people say is more stressful first or last. All right, so that's pretty much it. Basically, part 4. There's no slides. Oh yes, yeah, Jack.
Jen, just one thing before we end the recording. I just want to say I did 4th year rural in Bendigo and Castlemaine, and I didn't touch on that in this because the majority of people are metro. But if anyone is rural, I have lots to say, and there is a little bit of a different approach because of the semester-long GP, which is amazing. But feel free to message me on Facebook, and we can have a chat about that.
Cool. Awesome. Yes, forgot to touch on that actually. Everyone in this team has a very diverse set of experiences that we're coming from. Not just like the metro versus rural, but also the specific hospitals that we've been to, the rotations that we enjoyed the most or rotations that we didn't enjoy as much. Like we're all going to give you different perspectives, which is why James opened with that disclaimer of each of us is going to come in with very different things to say. We might contradict each other, and that's bound to happen because we're all individuals who learn in different ways and enjoy life in different ways. But the main thing is to find the things that work for you. So if you were able to get that out of today's session, that's essentially what we wanted to happen. So yeah, like what I was saying before, now it's basically the end. We will stop the recording very soon. Essentially, now it's all about talking. If you guys have any questions for us, or if you just want to rant about how your first couple of weeks on rotation has been, we're going to stick around for about 15 more minutes. Otherwise, we hope that you enjoyed today's session. We will definitely try and plan out a few more kind of more holistic sessions like we've been doing today. We figured out that, you have so much content, like resources out there, that us adding on to that pool is probably just going to make things more complicated, and they already are in 4th year. So we're going to try and focus on more of the holistic things that may not have been covered by previous PSPs and by faculty. But if you do have any feedback for us about how we're running things, just let us know. We're more than happy to take that on. Yeah, James.
Yep. And sorry, no, my bad. And we might do some targeted resources on a couple of niche things that we feel are not covered by other resources, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so goodbye to our online viewers. Thank you very much. Waiting for it to blink off.
Should we stop the recording for anyone who's recording right now?
Yeah, I think so.